All right, so we got everything up and running. So according to the schedule, I can actually pull that up right now. I will start with the student presentations today, just so that I can get all of the scheduled presentations out of the way before we do anything else. And here we are. Okay, the presentation schedule has changed a little bit since I sent it out. There were a few more people adding to the 14th, which is next Tuesday, and that's the last day to do presentations. Okay, if you want to sign up for additional presentations because you haven't signed up yet, send me an email as soon as possible, and ask for a particular date. And you might want to give me an alternative date too. The only 2 days left would be this Thursday, and we still have a lot of openings on Thursday and next Tuesday. And I think on next Tuesday, I only have maybe 3 or 4 openings left. So most of you who have not answered me or on the list and still want to do the presentation, which counts for your part of your grade, you have to do it on Thursday. So for today, we have this particular presentation. We have Harrington, and let's see, the 7th we have Berman, and also down here we have Mazer. Okay, so these would be the only 3 presentations for today. And does anyone want to go first, second, or third?
I'll go first.
You'll go first? Okay, so let me know what you need. What kind of a presentation?
I have a PowerPoint.
You have a PowerPoint? Okay. What about the next one? The other 2 presentations for today?
PowerPoint.
You have PowerPoint, and what about the third one?
He's not here yet.
Not here yet? Oh, okay, so that's, okay. I see. Okay. I think we'll just start with the 2 presentations that are ready to go. I can launch PowerPoint from here as well. So when you start, you might want to mention your name first. Okay, so if it is not a part of the already. All right. Okay. So is it a platform virtualization? Okay, so let me make sure that it does open here correctly. Okay, that looks good to me. So you can start the slideshow using, just press F5 to start it, and I'll move out of your way. I'll be on the other side.
Cool. So cut the bottom of it off a little bit, but so my name is Tom Harrington, and I'm doing my presentation on platform virtualization.
What's your name again, sorry?
Tom Harrington.
Okay. Got it.
And so mostly I'll be focusing on running multiple operating systems on a single computer using virtualization. So what is virtualization? So put it simply, it's running, you can run multiple computers within a computer. So instead of having the physical hardware, you could have, instead of having multiple computers or tower computers, you could just have it all be on a single computer. So what kind of systems can you run virtually? So some examples with Windows, you could run Windows 95, 98, XP, Vista 7, 8 even. With macOS, you could run Snow Leopard, Lion, Mountain Lion, probably some previous versions as well. And Linux, you could run Ubuntu, Fedora, Debian. Just a few examples of what you can run. So my current setup at home, I'm running Windows 8, but I'm also with one of my virtual machines is Windows XP. Then I'm running Ubuntu as another one, and I'm also running Snow Leopard as my third one. So why is it useful? Well, first of all, you save physical space, because instead of having a bunch of tower computers, you could run it all on a single one. So, that takes up a lot less space. it saves money because you don't have to buy a bunch of tower computers because it's all, again, on a single one. And energy, because instead of running 3 or 4, I'm only running mine on 1. Compatibility is not really an issue. So I wanted to run GarageBand. So when I pulled up on my Mac virtual machine, I could install it on there, because normally GarageBand would not be, you can't really run it on Windows. But with a virtual machine, you could install it on that particular system. Same thing if I wanted to install like like video editing software like Final Cut Pro or something like that, I could install it on here, and that way I could run it on my Windows machine. It's really easy to switch between operating systems because I use VirtualBox, which manages all of them. So right there, those are my 3 systems. All you have to do is set up and press start, and you have it running. It's really simple. You can run multiple systems at once. Say, for instance, my dad's setup at his work. This is his setup. Here, let's see. There we go. Oh, it's not running.
Oh, sorry. Is that a video?
Yeah, it was a video. I have it on my. I can show it a little bit later.
Okay.
But he's running. In this, he's running a Windows 8, a Ubuntu, a Windows 7, and then he has his main Windows 7 computer that's monitoring everything. So if your computer is powerful enough, you can run multiple ones at the same time, which can make really effective, for especially in his work when he has to switch between them back and forth. Another thing that's really useful about virtual machines is you can test software without just corrupting your main computer. So if I wanted to install something on my Windows 8 computer, I don't trust it, I could put up a Windows 8 virtual machine and run it on there. Because if anything happens to it on there, I could just restore it back to before I installed the software, or I can just reinstall the whole thing. Instead of having to reinstall my whole computer, it's just a small virtual machine. A lot easier to fix. So in summary, you can run multiple operating systems on a single computer. It's safe to test your software on it, and you save money, space, and energy. And it's something you can try by yourself, because VirtualBox is free, and you could get Ubuntu. That's pretty much it's free Linux system, and you can just experiment. It's pretty fun. So, real quick, I don't know.
You want to navigate to the drive?
Yeah.
We can do it today. Got time.
All right.
Remember which file?
Yeah, that one will be.
Does it have sound?
No sound.
Okay.
So it's just showing that he has Windows 8, then he's got Ubuntu on there, Windows 7 there, and that's just Windows 7 with the task manager, monitoring everything.
All right. Very good. Thank you. Are there any questions about? Yeah, go ahead.
VirtualBox, is that something we can? Is it Windows product? I mean,
Yeah, I have it installed on my Windows 8. You can run it on Windows XP, Windows 7. So yeah, you can download it for free.
Excuse me, can you share with us through Google Drive this presentation?
Yeah, I could put it up on Google Drive. Yeah.
Yeah, once you put it onto Google Drive, you can send a link to me. Then I can post it on Moodle. Then people can share it.
Okay.
But you don't have to. I mean, that's entirely up to you if you
Yeah.
want to. Okay.
Okay.
Very good. So are you ready? And I'll help you set up too. Put it up. That's the file.
Go ahead.
My name's Tim Lerman, and I'm going to be talking about internet phishing today. First off, before I start, just want to ask, does anybody know what phishing is, or general idea?
The practice of finding out information, basically getting information.
Yeah. So, has anybody here suffered from internet phishing before? Lost personal information because of it?
My friend actually lost his Xbox Live account through it.
They're hard to get back. So, here's the definition of phishing. It's the activity of defrauding an online account holder of financial information by posing as a legitimate company. So, and here you can see this in this comic. And they say that, I think this online quiz might be a phishing attempt. What's the quiz called? What your internet user's IDs, password, and social security numbers reveal about your personality. So. Ooh.
Sorry, that's a
Yeah.
compatibility.
I know you
issue.
can't really see, unfortunately.
We can still read it though.
Yeah. So how exactly does phishing work? Well, the phisher, little skull and crossbones up there, what they can do is they can set up illegitimate web servers, or even in this case right here in this example, they hijack a web server, and by using that they can send out mass emails or other means, maybe have phone calls, set up fake websites. And what they can generally do is by sending out these emails, they may have links that may say like, oh, you need to change your account settings by clicking this link. And what it will actually do is it'll send you to this illegitimate web server where you may put in your information. It may look totally legitimate, but it's not, unfortunately. And as soon as you do that, they have all your information, and they could easily get into any of your accounts. So some ways to recognize and avoid being part of a phishing scam is by paying attention to how they may word things. You may notice spelling or bad grammar, and here in this example you can see they say, please follow the link below. Also, links in emails, generally, if it's a legitimate company, they won't, in an email you get from, they won't put a direct link to their website. They will tell you to go to their website, but they will not have the link. And also, you can notice here, up in the other example above, how it may say it's, what is that, woodgrovebank.com, but if you hover over it, you can see it's actually going to a different IP, and not the actual website that it wants you to go to. Another thing that you may notice is they may include threats, such as your account will be permanently blocked. Most companies would not threaten you with things like that. They may say things like, your account has been locked temporarily, please go to our website to unlock it. But they wouldn't say things like, we blocked your account, or you may lose money or something like that. Also, a lot of phishers nowadays spoof a lot of these popular websites, such as Facebook or Twitter, or even like banks, and Bank of America, so on and so forth. So, unfortunately, there will always be phishing. It's not really, it's something hard to stop, as there's tons of people out there that want to always steal your information. So the general rule of thumb is to always be alert. In this picture he says, you've won $. Send us your info to collect. And the big fish is really like, ooh, wow, it's amazing. The little fish is a little smarter than him. He says, don't fall for it. Also, going back here, being alert, you really need to pay attention to these basic rules even. Just looking out for things like links in emails. You should never click a link in an email, even if it's something from someone that you trust and you know is, would never do anything, because you don't necessarily know it's them sending you the emails. So.
Thank you. That's a good presentation. Phishing is a big thing. I'm not sure how many people really watch out for these things, but it happens every day. You can get the ones that I get the most are the ones from allegedly from the BBB, Better Business Bureau, and they will say that my business is about to close, or they will or there are complaints filed against my business. So it's really they try to get your attention because a lot of people own a business of some kind. Okay, getting a threatening letter from the BBB is enough to push people then say, okay, I want to click that link and find out what's wrong with my business or what kind of complaints I've been getting and stuff like that. Now, if they try, ratemyprofessors.com and say that they're, like 20% of your students are complaining against you, I might actually click something, but not really. Yep, go ahead.
Just another thing, Microsoft actually has a lot of information about phishing in case anyone is curious about it. They have tons and tons of information on their website alone.
You can also educate yourself if that's what something that you're interested in or you want to find out more about it. Wikipedia has a really long page. You can see from the thumbnail, this is really just a fraction of what they have to say about it, but they contain there's a lot of information. If you look up the Microsoft website, I think they're more consumer friendly, so they don't really give you a big, long, huge spiel of the mechanics behind phishing, but they'll tell you what to watch out for as a consumer, so that you can you can avoid being a victim of phishing. Okay. Any questions? What if you get an email from a bank that you actually do business with, and they say that someone has been attempting to hack into your account, and if you don't respond within 24 hours, your account will be suspended or whatever. What do you do next? There's a link in the email. Yeah, call or walk into a branch. Okay, typically a bank will not close your account, as you said, permanently or take your money away. What they will do is they will just suspend your online access to the account, and that's it. They freeze all transactions. Nobody can draw money from your account. Nobody can do anything about your account until you walk in or call in to authenticate who you are. Okay, so using the phone number on your statement would still be the best way to do it. Walking into a branch is also a good way to do it. So if you cannot trust the link in the email and you think, okay, maybe I have an issue with this, just call or walk into a branch in person to get the business done. Okay. Any other questions? Yep.
So that question is just a comment. You're talking about banks. I got an email from PayPal last month.
Oh, they send me email all the time, phishing ones.
It says something probably hacking your activities in your account. I haven't touched my PayPal. I've been on eBay in years.
That's exactly why they do it that way.
But I tried just last week. I wanted to buy something on eBay, and I couldn't access my PayPal account. I know my email, I know my password, and it just wasn't working. And in the email it sent me, said if you don't respond within a couple of days, we'll do something with your account, like freeze it or something or other. I can't remember what it said now. So I'm now because I was worried. Was it actually legit? I didn't touch it for a month. I was like, oh yeah, whatever. It's a phishing, and it got sent into my junk folder. So I'm thinking, was it actually legit? So I don't know.
It's possible that it is legit, but if it is legit, what you need to do is to, hand enter the URL on the browser, go to paypal.com, okay, and then from there, I'm pretty sure they have a link to say, okay, if you have issues to resolve, click here, customer service or something along that line. So just do not click the links included in the email itself.
I didn't even open the email. At that time, when it came,
Yeah.
it was only when I tried to access to buy something on eBay last week. That's when I opened it and read it. I'm like, oh man.
the thing about PayPal is, they want you to purchase things and pay for them using PayPal. So they are much more eager than you are to reactivate your account. Does that make sense? Because if there's money moving, they make money. If they freeze your account, you cannot pay anything and you cannot receive money, they don't make any money out of your account. So they are much more eager to reactivate your account than you are. So keep that in mind. So so any email that tells you, oh, you know what, you will lose your ability to use PayPal forever, it's like, yeah, right. PayPal wants me to use the PayPal account. They would not do something like that. They would just shut it down or prevent further access to your account until they can actually verify who you are and make sure that your account is really you. I mean, or change your password, or whatever you need to do to make it more secure. Yep.
I have a Google Chrome, and most of the time in my bookmark, I save all the website from my accounts.
Okay.
Do they have the phishing?
Do they have?
Is there any way that the phishing that you say you're talking about?
That has nothing to do with your bookmarks.
No, from my website.
As long as you do not bookmark links from those emails.
Oh.
So don't click those links. Don't bookmark it. Just ignore the links from the email, the email messages. Any other questions about phishing? No other questions? All right. So are you ready to do your presentation? We're doing all the presentations first.
No, I didn't bring the paper. I left that at home today. So what should I do?
You can move it to Thursday.
Yeah, that'd be fine. Thanks.
Okay, so we'll move your presentation to Thursday. All right, so those are the only two presentations for this morning, and I think both went fairly well. There were a lot of content. There was a lot of content. I think the difficult part is really to organize it into 3 minutes. I think that really was the big challenge. Is just putting it into a 3-minute time frame, because phishing is a big topic. There's a lot of material to go through, and so is the virtualization. I mean, that's also a big topic with a lot of content. Are there any specific questions about virtualization? Because that's one thing that is really interesting, and a lot of people underestimate how much you can do or what you can do with virtualization. Go ahead.
You just go to Google and type in VirtualBox and you'll be able to find it.
Yeah. You go to Google. Yep. Go ahead.
There's also another one called VMware that I use.
Yeah, those are the two biggest ones. So I can just talk a little bit about virtualization. So this is one. You can go to VirtualBox, and then the other one is called VMware. I use neither, but I'm aware of both of these. Basically, one is they're both free. Okay, you can get either one for free, so you don't have to pay anything to use virtualization. Both will give you a GUI, a graphical user interface, so you can set up your virtual machine pretty easily, quickly, and you can launch them from the GUI as well. I think the main difference has to do with VMware also deal with server-side type of thing. So if you're familiarized, or if you're familiar with VMware products, that might be helpful in your career in the long run. VirtualBox, on the other hand, as far as I know, is a desktop-only type of virtualization tool. Do you know whether they have any server room type of setup with VirtualBox?
Not that I know of. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think they are set up to deal with big time server-based virtualization, but VMware is. So that's one of the differences. One big difference between the two products. The one that I use is called QEMU, which is all command line based, and I'm using it with my networking class. I'm teaching a networking class right now, and I'm using that so that people can set up virtual machines inside a physical machine, and not only that, they also can set up a network switch that is also virtual. So they can practice, doing all sorts of networking stuff like pinging, double checking the other side, setting up the IP address and stuff like that, without actually purchasing any additional hardware. It runs faster on newer platforms, but it can run all the way back to like 386 computers. It just runs a lot slower in that way. So did I answer your question in any way?
Yeah. So how do I, once you download that, how do I, because I want to get Mac.
you want to get a Mac. Now, I have never used, install Mac OS 10, so you will have to help answer that question.
That one's more difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of it is, that's where it gets like a thin line between legal, illegal kind of thing. But like a lot of the discs, like it's harder with the discs, but like you would, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So I have a Mac, and I downloaded Virtual to transfer different Windows to work.
Yep. Well,
Yeah.
you still run into issues, because inside the virtual machine, if you install Windows, you still need a licensed version of Windows to install it legally. And Windows may have in the EULA, in the end user licensing agreement, may have a clause that says it's not supposed to install inside the virtual machine. So you kind of have to look into that too. So it's kind of in the gray area, even in that case. Yep.
I know for the older Mac OSs, you didn't need license. I'm not sure about the newer ones.
Now the Mac OS 10, has multiple levels. So if you're talking about Darwin, I think that part is free. But if you look at, if you're talking about the actual Mac OS 10, I think that's licensed.
I'm talking about the older ones.
The
Some
older
of them
ones?
weren't licensed at all.
I don't think they really care about enforcing, the licensing at this point. But with the new version, the latest
Yeah.
versions, I think they are much more eager to enforce, the licensing terms. Yep. If anyone wants to, wants me to demonstrate, I actually have a virtual machine already in on my external hard drive, which is running here. So I can just, show you what it looks like when you run a virtual machine. I have XP and Windows 7. I have two virtual machines here. So let me go ahead and start a terminal here. The tool that I have, it's very command line based. In other words, I have to go to a particular folder and run a particular command to start it up. So this is basically my little script, to start it up. And this line here, let me move the cursor to the line that I want to talk about. This is one single line of commands to start up the virtual machine. So this is why you want to start, if you're just starting out, you want to start with a GUI tool, because otherwise you will have to learn, about all of this stuff here to figure out, what option you have to supply to the command line, interface in order to start up a virtual machine. On the other hand, this gives you the option of, automatically starting it up, or put it as a part of some other scripts. So it has its own advantages. But I can go ahead and just, show you what it looks like when it starts up. And in this window, in the window called QEMU, what you're seeing here is really, the virtual machine. In other words, I'm running a PC inside a PC, and the host environment, which is what the physical machine is running, it's Linux. But inside Linux, this is being run as a as a virtual machine. But the virtual machine, the operating system inside the virtual machine, doesn't really know it is inside the virtual machine. So from its perspective, it is just like it is working inside a regular PC. So you can install any operating system that you can normally install onto a regular PC, and then on top of the operating system, you can install any application that you can normally install in that operating system. Are there any questions? Yep.
I'm a little confused. When you say the virtual machine is installed inside the PC, it means that you have to download and open a file and folder in your operating system?
It means that you have to set it up. In other words, with any type of PC, you need to allocate resources to it. We have gone over the motherboard. So a virtual machine means all of those resources are quote unquote virtual. They have to come from the host operating system. So included in those resources would be RAM, memory. So you have to pre-specify how much memory to allocate to a virtual machine, how many processors to allocate to a virtual machine, and also disk space. Okay, and they're kind of specific, at this point. So I'm not going to go into the details, but you have to basically specify how much resources to throw or to allocate to the virtual machine, so that the virtual machine will basically see itself as, oh, I got 1 gig of RAM, or I have a 20 gig hard drive, or whatever resources you allocate to it. Yep, go ahead.
I think what she's asking is, do you have to download a specific program? Like, for any of the Linux platforms, you'll have to get the ISO, which is the disk image.
Right.
Put that on your hard drive, and then use VirtualBox or VMware to
Okay.
access that ISO.
Okay. So I can address that. Let me have your question first.
I'm really confused also. For Linux, you transfer it to Windows through operating systems. How does it work? I'm not sure I'm getting all this.
The virtual machine is being run just like any application, just like Microsoft Word, Microsoft PowerPoint, and stuff like that. Except it is a very specialized type of application, because its only job is to pretend that it is another PC. Okay? So now, when you're installing Windows, Linux, or Mac OS X inside the virtual machine, it is not like opening up a Word document, because to the virtual machine, the disk drive itself is nothing more than a file to the host operating system, just like a document or a PowerPoint presentation in PowerPoint. Now, obviously, these things all serve different purposes. So in this case, I'm running a virtual, Windows XP machine, and inside here, from this environment, if you don't see this title bar, you could just say that, oh, TAC is running Windows XP, just a little bit slower than natively on a hardware platform like this. There any question? Was your question properly addressed?
Yeah, that was good.
Okay. All right. Very good. Any other questions about running virtual machines? I should have done that for your presentation, so this way you would not have compatibility issues. Yep. Go ahead.
When I'm running the Snow Leopard, it has a lot of issues. Like, I had to work through a lot of bugs to get it to run. Well, but it still doesn't like to shut down. Also, I have to have it as state. I can't just shut it down and turn it on. I just have to restore it to a specific state to where it was. And it still can't the screen size. I have to work to resize it, because it's just a lot of bugs, because it's not meant to be
right
run on a PC like that.
Exactly. It's basically what you're talking about is hardware compatibility, because the virtual machine comes with a set of hardware capabilities, like sound card, network cards, hard drive controllers, and stuff like that. But Mac OS X may never be intended to run with those particular devices, so it might have made some assumptions about the hardware platform. And if the virtual machine does not emulate the hardware platform, the hardware devices that are expected by Mac OS X, the Mac OS X is going to have problems, even shutting down the machine, because it could not find the proper devices to do that. All right. Yep.
If you really, really like the look of, say, Mac OS X or any of the previous versions, but may not want to run all the programs, there is a Linux distribution that looks a lot like
Mac OS X, the GUI of Mac OS X. So it's kind of like putting a mask, on an operating system, so it looks a particular way, but underneath it is really just still Linux. But that would not help you, because you wanted to run a particular Mac OS X application, so you really need to run it, in Mac OS X.
I'm just saying look-wise.
Yeah, if you want the look and feel, right? All right. So, if I want to shut down my, virtual machine, I go through the same process. I click the start button, which is kind of hidden down there a little bit. The funny thing is I can actually resize my virtual machine so it looks a little bit smaller and it fits entirely on the screen. So I can go, it's still starting up, it's running particularly slowly. I think it has to do with me recording in the class, which is using the same physical hard drive as the virtual machine. So they're now competing for the resource, and that's why it's running a little bit slower. I would say a lot slower than just running it without the recording. Yep.
One issue I ran into was over provisioning.
your host environment will run out of resources
They
because of
can
that.
totally destabilize your host.
Right. But with newer machines, we have 8, 16 gigs of RAM, so that's not as big of an issue.
I had over provisioned one once, and it was not very good.
The other thing is, if you shut down the machines in the wrong order, you can end up with a corrupted file system inside the virtual machine. The worst thing that can possibly happen is not to shut down the virtual machine just by clicking the close button up here. That really is not the worst thing that can happen, because that is equivalent of pulling the plug of the guest operating system, the one that is emulated. Most file systems today are designed so that they can survive, a failure like that. Okay, your power fail. Typically, you lose the one file that you're trying to write at that time, but none of the other files will be lost. The worst thing that can happen is for me to pull the plug on the host operating system itself, because in that case, there will be changes that I need to save, onto the drive that has not been committed yet. And that can permanently hurt the file system inside the emulated environment. So that's one thing that people have to watch out for, is not to shut down the host system before the guest system is shut off, is shut down. So now I'm trying to shut it down, but it's going to take a really long time. So I'll do something that I'm not supposed to do, which is to basically just pull the plug on the guest operating system. It's okay because it's running NTFS, and NTFS is fairly resistant to that kind of problems. Are there any questions about what you just saw? Are there any interests in running virtual machines whatsoever? Yep.
And you were saying about hardware compatibility. So if one were to do a virtual Windows 95,
You'll be fine because Windows 95 run on older hardware, and the emulation will give you the devices that Windows 95 knows how to handle.
so even though the processor, the sound card, the video card are all newer stuff that Windows 95 never even knew existed.
They will never see the actual devices that is inside the box. They will only see the emulated devices supplied by the virtualization software. So if the virtualization says, okay, I'm going to emulate, EtherPro 100, which is a very old Intel Ethernet controller, then the virtual environment will only see that old controller, the old version of a Ethernet controller. So that should not be an issue. Older operating system is not an issue. Yep.
It's just like a PS2 or Xbox 360 being backwards compatible.
Okay.
So you're having hardware that's further along that can run older stuff.
Yeah, but it's not even using any actual hardware
No.
inside the virtual machine. They're all emulated. Yep, go ahead.
I have a MIDI controller that just recently got, and I wanted to get GarageBand on my PC so that I could use the keyboard on GarageBand rather than like Fruity Loops or something like that, just because I like it. But I've kind of held back on actually doing that because I was worried that the virtualization process might cause too much lag with like the real-time playing of the.
There will be lag introduced because of virtualization. The USB device, I'm assuming your MIDI device is USB.
Yeah.
The MIDI device can be passed through, so that should not be a big issue. You can actually pass through devices.
Yeah.
So the host that doesn't do anything about it is the guest operating system who will get the device. But there will be a lag. It depends on your hardware platform. If you have a faster processor with virtualization hardware, like the i5 and the i7 processor, you might be fine depending on what type of app you're running inside the virtualization environment.
Yeah.
If you're running an older i3 processor, I would say forget it because it doesn't have any virtualization acceleration, and without acceleration, it's really slow. It also depends on the software that you're running, whether it is using a lot of processing resources or not.
Yeah.
I would say give it a try. I mean, you really don't know until you give it a try.
Yeah.
Yep. Just keep your receipt for your purchases. Okay. Any other questions? Yep. Mm-hmm.
When you're like running a what is it? when you're virtualizing and you're trying to play games. You've been saying like there's like some lag. Is that like wholly dependent on like the hard drive's ability to like keep up with it?
It's not the hard drive's capability, it is your graphics controller or your display controller. So it depends a lot on the kind of game that you're playing. I have used an old computer like a cisc310 processor and run StarCraft, successfully through it, through virtualization, and it was definitely playable. I mean, it was like running it on an older, P3 platform.
I'd be more interested in like the really old school, the really cool ones, like what was it, like Wing Commander, like the ones from like.
That should be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, with those you don't have any problems. With anything that expects a particular graphics card or a certain level of graphics card, then you will run into problems because any type of 3D rendering will be like horrendously slow.
So basically, the older it gets in terms of operating system you're running, the easier it gets.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yep. Go ahead.
I use a Linux distribution called Commodore OS Vision, and it has a lot of older games.
Yep. You mean Commodore 64 type? Because even the Amiga, by today's standard, is a very, very slow platform. So we can probably even do hardware emulation with that. Any other questions about networking? I mean virtualization. No questions. Okay. So on a little drive like this, I have like multiple virtual machines already. And I'll just do one more thing to illustrate, virtualization before we move on. The hard drive, to the virtual machine is a single file from the perspective of the host operating system. In other words, I have this one file called hd.img from the Linux perspective, and that one single file is a huge file to begin with. It's a 40 gig file, but that one single file is basically the hard drive from the perspective of the virtual machine. So if I want to make a backup of any kind, let's say I'm about to do something that is quote unquote questionable and I don't know whether it will harm the machine or not, this is the one file that I have to back up. Once I back up this file, I can do whatever needs to be done, and later on if I want to restore the system to its original state, I just have to overwrite this file with a backup, and that's it. So it's completely, it's super easy to back up a virtual machine as long as it's a relatively small virtual machine. It's easy to back up, easy to restore, and you can put it inside a handheld external hard drive. So you can actually take your you can take your virtual machines with you, wherever you go. So that makes it kind of handy. Any other questions about virtualization? Go ahead.
Can servers be virtualized?
Yes. In fact, that is the main reason why people have to learn about virtualization. Okay, so that's a very good way to kind of talk about things that we are supposed to talk about anyway. So think about the job of a system administrator. Okay, a system administrator is basically someone who has to keep servers up and running. Okay, you just have to kind of think about what if D2L is to go down. Okay, what if Moodle goes down? What if the lost reels, e-surfaces, is to go down? The scheduling, is to go down. Bad things happens, right? So and if you think about all those machines and each one as a individual physical server, then you have a lot of machines to maintain. Is that right? Okay. Yep.
I know you said VMware Player was free. VMware Workstation, they're actually charging for?
Yep.
The server?
Yeah, Workstation is not free, but you don't need Workstation to create a virtual machine. Yep.
Just Player's fine.
Yep.
You were talking about like virtualizing like servers. Is that basically, if not similar, to cloud computing? Or basically,
it is closely related to cloud computing. Remember, we did talk about cloud computing in this class.
Yeah.
And one of the attributes of a cloud is it makes use of a virtualization technology. So what I'll do is I'm going to use my fancy camera. Okay, so let's see, where is it? Here. Okay, so here's my handy dandy projector here. Okay, so before virtualization, a server room will typically have multiple actual servers. Okay? And each one has a particular purpose. In other words, if I use the school's setting, the Power Server that some of you may use for your web classes is one. E-Services is another one. Moodle is another one. D2L is another one. What else? IMail. Okay, IMail is going away. But it can be its own server too. So within the district, we also have PeopleSoft to handle the paychecks and all the other stuff. So we have a whole big list of servers. If each server is to serve only one single purpose, okay. That concept does not have any particular weakness, so to speak, but it is a lot of machines to maintain. In other words, each one has its own disk array, each one has its own hard drive, has its own processor, and so on and so forth. Think about upgrading, okay? When it is time to upgrade, let's say all of these, physical machines, were purchased, at about the same time, so they will all obsolete at about the same time. Upgrading a server is actually, it's a lot of hassle, because you have to reinstall the operating system, you have to move the files over, and so on and so forth. So it's a lot of work to upgrade everything. So think about the opposite. Okay, so this is one thing without virtualization. Now, on the other hand, we can purchase one $30,000 computer. I'm not kidding. Okay, these servers that are intended for running multiple virtual machines, they are around $30,000 to give you enough processing power. Yep, go ahead.
Are you talking about the supercomputer?
No, it's not a supercomputer. It's just it is a computer that has a lot of resources, but I don't think it is still in the same league as a supercomputer. It's just a computer with a lot of resources. Okay, so inside the actual machine, now I have these virtual machines, the same kind of virtual machines, but they're now, no, let me take it back. The same servers, but now running as virtual machines inside one physical box. Okay, what do you think would be the advantage of running everything into one, turning it into one single, putting everything into one single physical machine? Yep.
When it comes time to upgrade it, you only have one machine that you have to do that.
Not only that, the virtual machines do not need to be upgraded at all. They can be untouched. They just suddenly run a lot faster. Yep.
You're going to save on space and energy.
Yep, you can save space, you can save energy. Now, the saving energy part is, go ahead.
I was going to say it's much easier to manage.
It is a lot easier to manage. Because before, as servers, each one has its own disk array. Okay, remember we talked about RAID a little bit in this class? The servers run something that is a little bit more industrial compared to just RAID. But it's the same concept. So each one has its own disk array, which means somebody has to periodically check the disk arrays and look for disks that are about to go bad or have gone bad already. And then they have to physically go to different machines at different locations to replace the worn out hard drives. After virtualization, you still have a disk array. In fact, it is a lot bigger than the individual ones. But you know what? They're all centralized into the same location. So there's only one place you have to go in order to maintain, quote unquote, maintain all the servers. Yep.
Isn't that a big disadvantage because you're putting all your eggs in one basket?
Well, we can split it into two baskets. Okay, so that's the other advantage of virtualization is at some point, let's say the district has enough money, they can buy a second server. Okay. Now, once you have a second server, you can play a lot of games now. Not the game kind of video game, but you can do a lot of tricks. Okay. So what you can do is you can have one server here. Let's say this is our Moodle server, okay? And somehow, this physical machine is a little bit overloaded. There are other, virtual servers that are taking up a lot of processing resources. And Moodle, needs to be expanded because there are more classes offered through Moodle, okay? So what are we gonna do? We can transplant a virtual machine from one physical box into another physical box with a downtime in milliseconds. Okay? So from your perspective as a Moodle user, it is as if the server has never gone down at all. And in reality, it has moved from one physical box to another physical box. And we can also, because the other physical box, this one here, has more resources, so Moodle can suddenly start to run faster without any downtime whatsoever. Are you guys kind of seeing, getting the idea, the basic concept? Different type of companies use different terminology. In VMware terminology, this is called vMotion. The movement of a virtual machine from one physical box to another physical box. What do you think would be? Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, by doing this that you talked about, doesn't that eliminate the concept of having raids?
You still have a RAID, okay? The concept is now, when you have a setup like this, where you have different physical servers, but you want to support the movement of virtual machines. The way it is done, okay, so let me take this slide out and move on to the other one. So let's say this, we have VM servers, okay? This is a virtual machine server 1. This is virtual machine server 2, and we'll just have 3, okay? Virtual machine server 3. Okay, so each one does not really have its own RAID anymore. Instead, what they do is they connect all of these 3 through SAN, or Storage Area Network, to a common storage solution. Okay, so we are no longer talking about a RAID, hard drive RAID. We are talking about a subsystem, okay, that's hanging off of the SAN, or the Storage Area Network, that has far superior, in terms of efficiency, performance, and also redundancy. It is its own box. Your storage is its own box. There are companies that make these boxes. I'm trying to remember the companies. Hitachi is one, and then the other one is EMC. Okay, I mean, who has heard of EMC before? It's kind of like an obscure company, but EMC is actually behind most of the high performance servers of any kind, because most of the high performance servers do not have their own storage system inside the box. They have the storage they're sitting somewhere else, where the only purpose of this box here, okay, this is actually we can call this storage unit 1. It is self-contained. It's one box. It hooks up to the Storage Area Network, which typically uses a fiber optic as the cabling. So it's capable of 2 5 gigabits per second of communication easily, and you can add additional channels to make the speed really even higher. So one thing you can do in this case is very interesting. What if virtual machine server 1 is getting old, and we really have to get rid of it, okay? Because it's getting old, and it's just not working well anymore. So we purchased virtual machine server 3 as a replacement. But I don't want any service to go down. In other words, I don't want e-services to go down. I don't want Moodle to go down. I don't want D2L to go down. So what we can do is we can have let's say this is Moodle, this is D2L, and this is e-services, okay? We can, as these servers are still active, still running, and still servicing you, okay? We can actually, in real time, move all of these virtual machines over to another virtual machine, just like that. And they will have an interrupt of milliseconds. So if you click something, while this is happening, you will experience a delay of multiple milliseconds. Can you detect multiple milliseconds? 1 millisecond is 1,000th of a second. That is how fast they can move these things from one physical box to another physical box. And then after you move all of the virtual servers from one physical box to another physical box, I can now power down this thing with no consequences whatsoever. Okay. In fact, this is the kind of technology that is, I would say, not really on the cutting edge, but it is definitely being utilized in industry a lot, and they are running out of people who can do this. They're really running out of people who can do virtualization, because anyone who can do this type of thing is already employed by some kind of cloud type company. Any company that relies on cloud technology requires people who can deal with this type of technology. Any questions about this? Yep.
You said physical machine, the beginning, it has those servers, and in order to open the Moodle servers, you have to get another virtual machine server. And everyone has their own virtual machine 0 servers. Once you do that, you have to storage in one storage unit. My point is, do they use the same administrator?
Do they use the same?
Yes, the system administrator.
System administrator?
Yeah.
Yes, we can actually save in terms of the labor of system administration, because instead of having multiple boxes to maintain, to dust, to upgrade, and so on and so forth, now we have one or a few very big boxes that we have to upgrade and maintain. So, and that really saves a lot of time. Yep, go ahead.
The reason why the downtime on what is it called,
vMotion.
vMotion, there we go, is the limiting factor on that is transfer rate, right?
Right, because you're transferring the entire virtual machine. That includes not only the disk system, not only the storage system, but also the RAM, the memory that is used by the virtual machine.
I see. So it's kind of like, instead of the Moodle server being a thing, it's a file that has a couple different components like RAM and stuff, but it's just
right. The entire state of a box of a machine has to be saved onto a file, and then the file has to be accessible to the other machine. So what happens is, in the actual motion, I can just flip it. This is handy. I should have gotten this a little bit earlier. Okay, so here's one physical box, one virtual machine server. Here's another one, and we have a storage subsystem here. Okay, so if you just look at Moodle as a virtual machine, the disk, the so-called disk drive, that's already being stored as a file in here. Okay, so I'm going to use this icon here to represent a file, a folder. Okay, but what is not typically stored into a file that you have to save is the RAM. In other words, the RAM or the memory of a virtual server is typically not saved to a file. It is really just mapped to some physical RAM inside the physical server. So this RAM, when you do a vMotion to move a virtual machine from one box to another box, what you need to do is to save the RAM and also the state of the the network controller card and stuff like that onto the attached storage device. Then you can have this same file pulled up by the other box, and then you can recreate the virtual server on the other side. And the milliseconds are really there to save everything that is not usually already saved into the mass store device, which is the RAM.
I see. So it's really just transferring the RAM.
It's really transferring RAM and other things that are transient, things that are typically not saved on the drive. But the entire file system is already there.
Because it's
So
stored.
Right, because so the bulk of it, in hundreds or in hundreds of gigabytes and terabytes, is already there. That stuff does not need to be transferred because you're accessing the same storage device from the other side. It's only about a few gigabytes of RAM and possibly megabytes of states of your various cards, your hard drive controller, your network card, and stuff like that, that has to be saved and then restored. And milliseconds is basically all it takes to transfer, like a few gigabytes of stuff. Yeah. So that stuff is really high end. That's really high end stuff. And I think they might have technology that can transfer most of it, and only at the very last, few milliseconds, finish up, the rest of it. So before the transition, they can reconstruct the Moodle server on the other side as much as they can and only leave the very small delta at the very end to go, okay, we just got a few more megabytes to transfer and we are now done.
I get it.
So I think they have different technologies to help accelerate that process. But from the end user experience, you're only experiencing a few milliseconds of downtime, which is amazing. Can you guys think of any other way why virtualization can be useful in addition to being able to upgrade a server on the fly without taking the services down? What about distributing the load, making everything faster? It's possible, right? Because if originally I have 20 virtual servers in one physical box, if I get the money to buy like a few more boxes like this, I can spread them out a little bit better. So each virtual machine can run faster in that case. Now with an operating system like Linux, the nice thing about Linux is depending on the file system you are using, you can actually in real time, without shutting down the machine, expand the storage system. Okay, is everybody understanding what I just said? Okay, now if you're working with a whole machine like in Windows, okay, so let's say you're working with Windows, it's a relatively old computer, and you're running out of disk space, okay? What do you have to do in that case? You need a bigger hard drive, okay? So let's just say that you have the ability of hot plugging a new hard drive. In other words, you don't have to shut down the system. Can you utilize the additional space of a new hard drive without shutting down or rebooting the operating system?
The way you're explaining this, yeah, you just copy the file over.
No, but in Windows. In Windows 7 or Windows 8, there's no way you can do it. Okay, you have to somehow either transfer all your content from your old hard drive to the new one and then expand the partition size on the new one, or you have to do some other tricks. I don't know in Windows whether they have the ability to dynamically add storage to a particular partition, but as far as I know, there's no such way to do it. But in Linux, with extension 3, you can do it. You can actually dynamically add additional space to a partition in real time, and and it just gets bigger without having to shut down the system. So virtualization also kind of works with that type of technology, because now it has happened multiple times already. Not on the Moodle server that we use for this class, but on some other Moodle servers. I have run out of disk space, and people complain, we cannot log in because it's out of space, and the database basically stops working at that point. So I would go in, I will allocate more space on the fly, and just restart the database, restart the web server, and now everything is going again without having to shut down and restart the system. Yep.
I'm trying to formulate a question like that here. So if big corporations and the government, I'm assuming not as well, do they have their system set up like this?
I would say most big organizations already have virtualization in place.
So when hackers hack into it, they hack into a virtual machine.
They can only get into a virtual machine. So if you look at this picture here, and let's say this is the internet. Okay, this is the internet. Under a normal setup, a connection will connect only into a virtual machine, but not into the physical machine itself. Now the physical machine does have its own network interface, but it's usually not exposed to the internet. So that means a hacker can hack into one of the virtual machines inside the box, but typically they cannot hack into the box itself.
Now when certain useful hackers, when they want to play with a website and they modify, like the DoD or something like that, just the main website, it becomes a big deal, and we hear about it in the news. Couldn't the operator, the administrator, could he just say, okay, now if they're playing with the virtual, I'll just take the backup, we'll splash it on there, and no one will be the wiser?
It does make it easier to restore, because remember what I said, the entire disk or the partition from the perspective of a virtual machine is nothing more than a regular file from the perspective of the host environment. So it does make restoring easier, but it does not make hacking any easier or harder, because you're still running the same thing. It just makes it easier, it takes less time to restore a virtual server than it takes, to restore a actual physical server. I'll put it that way. Right. Yep, so this kind of thing is really kind of important if you're into system administration, networking stuff, the back end, the infrastructure of corporations, this is really what is going on, these days, behind the scenes. Are there any other questions about this? No questions? Nobody cares. Yep, go ahead.
How well does virtual machines do with hot swaps, with hot swapping drives?
It's completely transparent because the hot swapping has to do with, okay, so in this picture, the hot swapping is really done to the network attached storage, the NAS. And these hard drives, basically provide the storage capacity to all the different virtual machines. So this is really what is going on in the back end. The virtual machines, do not realize that they're running on top of, a system like that. In fact, it makes system administration a lot easier on the virtual servers because the virtual servers do not need to know anything about RAID or any type of, hard drive arrays anymore because a single partition to the virtual machine is just as reliable as any RAID setup because the back end is already using RAID for redundancy and also performance. Yep.
With the NES, then it's kind of like with all the virtual machines, when it looks at the NES, it's kind of like you have this much room. That's all it has to worry about, right?
Yep.
Because everything beyond that is handled by the actual unit itself, right?
Right.
Okay.
Now the NAS, basically supplies an entire file system to all the different virtual machine servers.
But all they see is their partition, right?
The virtual machines only see their own partition, which is a single file from the host's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So you can either supply a second file, which maps to a second drive to the virtual machine on the fly, or you can expand, an existing file, on the fly. That may or may not be possible depending on the file system itself.
Nice.
That's a limitation of the operating system running inside the virtual machine and not really so much a limitation of the host environment. Any other questions about this? No questions? Does anyone run any type of servers at home? No? Okay.
Setting one up.
Okay. Now, if you run a server at home, are you going to run one single server, or are they going to be multiple servers?
Probably just one.
Probably as one. Okay. Do you have any other machines that you have to keep running 24/7?
We have before. Like me and my dad have set up one up, but it doesn't run much anymore.
Okay. I have multiple servers at home, and right now each box takes up 75 watts because they're older boxes. I have one that is running a Pentium 4 processor, and that's just basically a space heater, pretending to be a computer. Yep.
My dad used to have a bunch of, he had like 3 or 4 servers in the garage, but he eventually got rid of most of them, and now they're all on one box.
So they're virtualized. Yep. That's the way to do it. Because once you virtualize, as long as you can still handle the peak load when they are all under peak load.
There's nothing really on them either, so
yeah. So
they're more just like test environments, basically.
So the box itself, is probably only drawing 40, 50 watts or so, under idle conditions. Yep. Instead of 75 or 100 watts each, so you're saving a lot in terms of electricity. Okay. Any other questions? Now, from the consumer perspective, there is one big advantage. Every time you want to upgrade just the hardware because you want to run something faster, if you have been running a virtual machine all along, it makes the upgrade of the hardware just like that. Because all you have to do is to reinstall VMware, VirtualBox, or QEMU on the new hardware, move all the files over, and you're done. All your virtual machine will run faster, but you don't have to reinstall anything. You don't have to transfer any applications or end user data. They are just running faster on the new platform. Yep.
So on the actual hard drive, before the transfer, will it be read? Is it like in a folder itself? And say folder would be Windows 8, the other folder would be.
It'll be just like this, like what I demonstrated a little bit earlier. From the host environment perspective, the entire hard drive of that Windows XP is a single file. So I can move this file from an older computer that is running slow to a newer computer that's running a lot faster, restart the virtual machine, and I don't have to reinstall anything at all. But I'll be running the same operating system, having the same application, the same user data settings, and the same user data, except it's going to run a lot faster. So that makes it very easy for consumers to upgrade their computers, because now you don't have to reinstall anything, you don't have to transfer anything, it just works out of the box. Yep.
Well, if you were a consumer with a desktop and you were always running inside a virtual environment, that virtual environment, let's say you're running Windows 7. If I, on the host computer, was running Windows 7, would I know I would be avoiding compatibility issues.
There's no correlation between those two operating systems. In other words, you can run Linux on the actual hardware box and still run Windows as a virtual machine.
Yes, but you were just saying with Mac that there were certain issues. Somebody was saying here in the room that there the resizing and the problems with that, and then something about the hardware.
But that's a limitation. That's a limitation of the emulation program itself, not so much with the operating system.
I see. So there is no real advantage, other than what you were just talking about, virtualizing with the same operating system. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Once you virtualize, your host operating system can be anything, and I would pick Linux, first, because it doesn't take up a lot of resources, so you have more resources available for your virtual machines.
Makes sense.
If you start with Windows, Windows takes up a lot more resources to begin with, then you don't have as much resources left for your virtual machines. Now, on the other hand, if you also want to run games natively in Windows, then you still want to install Windows on your newer, faster machines so they can play your games faster. All right, we are running out of time. If you want to set up your presentation on Thursday, send me an email so I can keep track of who is going to make presentations on Thursday. All right.